10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff, and the clock is starting.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And as we wait for wisdom from the oracles at Squad, it's time now for Kerbalcast, episode 63, 1.1 and Xbox One.
We are blowing the doors wide open for the modding community.
That is, of course, Max Maps, our honorary mission commander. I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin. Our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Coming up in today's program, we have a lot of progress to talk about. Duna, Eve, Ike, and Jool. It is our progress in the game.
Freetoss shares his thoughts about 1.1 and another episode of Flight Fundamentals.
J. Arthur has the mining tutorial.
An audio letter from Kerbal Carl and another episode of A Kerbal Life.
And your letters and tweets in the mission briefing. Well, the little soundbite you heard, that came from the episode of Squadcast. We're recording this on August the 22nd, 2015. Squadcast, the last night's episode, obviously August 21st, 2015. They had some details about the upcoming 1.1 version of Kerbal Space Program, and we want to go ahead and get right into it. Starting out, according to Max Maps,
We are, I would say, 99.99999 recording percent done with the Unity 5 upgrade. The game has been ported completely to Unity 5.
And MaxMap says upgrading KSP to the Unity 5 engine will make a big difference in terms of game performance.
Unity 5 is the newest version of the Unity engine. Kerbal, for now, is running on Unity 4. Now, what does that mean for Kerbal Space Program? Let's start down the list. First of all, Unity 5 comes with a new version of physics. This new version of physics does something that the game currently does not do. Kerbal Space Program will use all cores in your processor in different things for different things, like, positioning or whatever. It'll use a bunch of cores for different things. However, actually running the physics of your ship and the way parts interact with each other and the way the aerodynamics go through your vessel, they are all isolated to one single core in your processor. The new version of Unity has a new version of physics, and that version of physics allows you to offload that load into all other cores of your processor.
Unity 5 also means that 64-bit will be native across all platforms, including Windows, Apple, PS4, and the just-announced Xbox One. Linux already has 64-bit. This is a big deal for players who like to use a lot of mods.
And it allows you to mod it till it breaks, and the point where it'll break, it'll be how much RAM you have in your system. If you're one of those crazy people who likes to install the highest possible quality texture mods for your Astronomer's Visual Pack, or you like to run literally every single thing that B9 has made for the game, like all those parts from the B9 Aerospace, that's something you can do now. Like, that's what it means to unlock all your RAM. We were doing some trials at the office this week, and we just adding basically data that's not going to get used into the game. The game was purring like a kitten and using 9 gigabytes of RAM. And that was just like as much as we could pile up at that moment. The more you add, the better.
MaxMap says that the Unity 5 upgrade is substantial enough to justify the 1.1 release, but Squad is going well beyond that. In addition to new features, KSP 1.1 will also feature an almost totally redesigned user interface.
The way Kerbal Space Program's UI works right now, it's actually 3 different UI systems working together because all 3 systems had different limitations, and our game is so broad, we simply needed to bring them all together. So what we did is like, you know what? That's it. The new version of the UI tools that comes with Unity 5 is super cool. It's solid as a rock, and it has so many features that it means we can redo the whole UI and have a way more efficient UI by doing this. So that was the mammoth undertaking of the U5 upgrade. Redoing every single element. Well, not every single element, but about 2 out of 3 elements in the UI of KSP had to be remade from the ground up, and they had to be made in a way that they look exactly the same or almost exactly the same as what you have right now. You know what that means? that means that the game by itself, just without being 64-bit, without multi-threading, just by itself is going to run way more efficiently because we're just using one unified, super efficient UI system.
Squad had announced earlier that the Remote Tech mod will also be integrated into KSP with an adjustable difficulty setting, meaning you can turn it off if you don't want it. But either way, you'll have access to new antenna parts in 1.1.
1.1 is going to have a new system that makes all antennas in the game, and we're adding new antennas, reliable, and it means that they have different uses, they can be used for different things, and they are absolutely vital to probe use if you turn on those difficulty levels.
MaxMaps also said that the contract system will be more dynamic, adjusting to your gameplay variables.
We are doing a new feature called contextual contracts. What that means is that from now on, the game will not only create contracts based on your current progress in exploration of the Kerbal system, it will also generate contracts based on things that you have built around the Kerbal system. What that means is that if you have a space station around Minmus, you might get a contract that says, hey, go into that space station and add an extra laboratory into it, and then send us some science from that laboratory, and we'll give you a bunch of extra science and a bunch of money. Or, hey, that satellite you set up around Lathe, it was great at the orbit it was for the past few months. However, we would like you to modify its orbit. Once you do that, we're going to give you X amount of stuff. We're not adding new contracts, or we're not adding a lot of breadth to it. We're not adding a whole bunch of new contracts, but we're adding depth to the actual contract system. That's the point of it.
And a release date was not specifically mentioned for 1.1, so we'll have to be patient for a little bit longer. Also joining us now, Freetoss was there during Squadcast, and he has some thoughts about 1.1 as well.
The announcement that MaxMaps made was awesome. I cannot express how stoked I am for this update of Kerbal Space Program. Honestly, even more so than 1.0. They've really gone ahead and addressed a lot of good issues with the game. Finally getting the Unity 5 update is going to be awesome. Finally getting 64-bit is going to be amazing, especially for me. I can finally have the prettiest princess of a game with, on my personal machine, 16 gigs worth of RAM of prettiness before my game crashes with DOS and everyone else watching me on Twitch. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait. The physics update means that I won't have to use physical time acceleration anymore, hopefully. Obviously, we don't know what the exact quantification of the improvements will be, but it really seems like larger ships and stations and things like that, things with lots of heavy physics calculations, will run a lot smoother because it will allow for multi-core processing, which will be amazing. The UI update and other optimizations that Max talked about should make the game run so much better. We'll see if North Star approves. I imagine that we will get his reaction in a letter soon, or immediately after it comes out. And actual new features, which I know that they had announced the remote tech like antenna and probe editions, but I totally wasn't expecting the multitude of airplane parts, which, as you guys can imagine, I'm super excited for. It should be awesome. That space shuttle engine, I have high hopes for. I couldn't be happier. I think it'll be amazing. That's pretty much all I got for now. I'm at the edge of my seat. I can't wait for 1.1. It'll be amazing. I will be sinking my teeth into a whole bunch, all those new parts, all the new features. I look forward to covering them all for you guys in Flight Fundamentals, both how to do remote tech and the eventual stock application, and a review of all the new airplane parts.
You know, I knew that of all of the announcements about 1.1, Freetoss was going to go bonkers over the airplane parts. I knew that. I like, they talked about how you can now gimbal the engines, which is going to be, I mean, you can do that during the construction phase, which I think is going to be really cool. The thing that really tickled me to death, and by the way, thank you, Freetoss, for your comments about 1.1. We're going to hear from him later in the program. He's got progress report and also, of course, Flight Fundamentals. The thing that I'm tickled to death about, 64-bit native, Linux folks have been enjoying that for a long time. Windows folks and Apple's folks are about to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I also like that it is going to take advantage of multi-core processing. That's cool. And I was real tickled because Max Maps said that you can the sky is the limit in terms of, if you have, 20, I have 24 gigabytes of RAM in my laptop. Mm-hmm. I can use every bit of it now.
Yeah.
You can now load as many mods as you want. And as long as you've got the RAM for it, it'll work. He said that they did a test, and I don't think we had this in the little excerpts, but he said that they did a test at Squad and they loaded in every mod they could think of, and it was still only running 90 gigabytes of RAM. And he said, and it was purring like a kitten.
Wow.
So that makes me excited.
Yeah.
Anyway,
wait, how many gigabytes of RAM?
He said that it was only using 9 gigabytes of RAM.
Oh, I thought you said 90, and I'm like, okay,
90.
Yeah, that only narrows it down to like no one.
Yeah, yeah.
my 90 gigs of RAM.
Well, no, he said that they put in every mod they can think of, and even with the game running beautifully, it was still only using 9 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't say, I don't think he said how much RAM they had installed.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you're running a bunch of mods and you're still only using 9
gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You could totally, think about it. If you've got the RAM, you could virtually run a completely unique install of Kerbal. So that would be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited about the variable contracts and them changing us with the style. So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how they're going to implement that.
Well, I think, wasn't that one of our ideas? Don't they owe us $1 million?
I don't know.
We've had so
anymore.
many ideas over the year.
Yeah, it's just this, I don't know, idea echo chamber.
You know what's funny is that if they really wanted to go on a point system, they could probably, like, every idea they didn't use, they would subtract $1 million.
Yeah.
And every idea they used, they would add $1 million. We'd probably end up owing them money.
Yeah, we're fighting to break even at best.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, also, we talked about this briefly, but I do want to make sure that we do make the point. Squad also made the announcement this week that in addition to PS4, Kerbal Space Program is now coming to Xbox One.
Yeah.
So, I have said this before. I will say it again. I have no problem whatsoever with this game going to console. The more audience this game gets, the more platforms it's on, I think is nothing but good. Mm-hmm. The more money that we can put in Squad's pocket, the better.
Yeah, and the more people that get to experience a game that uses like real science.
Right.
I
know that one of the concerns of the listeners, and I'm not concerned. I understand it's a possibility. I would be surprised if it becomes a reality. The concern is that Squad is going to start focusing on the console more than the PC.
Yeah, the PC game is it's at version 1.
Yeah.
So, it is complete to an extent. So, if they went off to other things, you do have a completed game. You're not constantly getting more content.
Right.
You do have a completed game.
Right.
They could just jip, the console people. It's like, do this QuickTime event to rendezvous.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Tap A as fast as you can to rendezvous.
Please.
It's time to land. Hit the land button.
Instead of Kerbal Space Program, it would be God of Kerbal Space Program.
Yeah.
The God of War games.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I love the God of War games, every time one of those mini games would come up, I'd be like, oh, no.
Yeah.
No. Oh, okay. Twirl the little thumbstick this way.
Yeah.
And push this button. And it was like, no. This was so much fun until that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, God. Can you imagine Kerbal like that?
Nothing but QuickTime events.
Yeah. Well, I know this is not likely, but I am still hoping I would, if Squad wants to make me a happy person, if they want to bring a ray of sunshine into my life, they could announce PS Vita. That would tickle me. I think it would be really cool if they did, like, for example, a 3DS version of the game. Because, with the touch screen, that would be...
I don't think I could handle crashing in 3D.
It's got the slider, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it'd slide as you get closer to the ground, too.
Well, think about, how the camera shakes now in the game. Imagine it shaking in 3D.
There's so many vomit-covered DSs.
I know. We could, here's another $1 million idea. You ready?
What?
Mario space program. You
You got to get that crossover.
Yeah. Can you imagine? You'd be get up into orbit and you'd start like knocking like
Koopas over and
yeah,
stuff.
Koopas and yeah,
Goombas or yeah.
yeah. You know, we could get $1 million for that, and then Nintendo could sue us for
20.
Yeah, they could sue us for 20 because we stole Mario.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mario space program.
You know,
it's a thing.
That's the danger you run into. You know, whenever you enter the stealing ideas game.
Yeah.
You know, it's a rough life.
Right. Anyway, so that brings us up to Spade as far as the news of the week. 1.1. As I said, no release date was given. I'm trying to remember when they started talking 1.0, when they were talking about it at this stage, it wasn't, how long was it? Can you remember how long it was after they started talking about it like this that we actually got it? Wasn't it a month or two?
For which thing?
For 1.0?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Maybe like 2 or 3 months. I don't really remember.
Squad plays things very close to the chest.
We had a lot of episodes of people saying that it wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Including us. Yeah. We're under the bus too, folks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was probably at least a month and a half.
Something like that.
Minimum.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Well, Squad plays things fairly close to the chest. So for them to say as much as they've said indicates to me that they're
far along in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'll be curious to see. It looks like 1.1 will be good. The redesigned UI is going to be interesting. I wonder if it's going to be.
Yeah, I want to see what's up with that.
Well, when they say redesigned, it makes me wonder if they're talking redesigned like Windows 7, Windows 8 redesign, where all of a sudden you're trying to find things.
Yeah.
Because when they one thing that they changed in the VAB and the spaceplane hangar, do you remember? I'm trying to remember, was it 1.0 where they implemented this, or was it 0.90? But do you remember where you used to be able to save constructions that you could literally drag in? Well, it used to be that was just part of the main menu. Now you have to click a couple menus in to get to it, where you can save actual builds.
Yeah, you
used to not have to click in a couple to do that, and then they added that, and that was one of those, when they added that, it took me a minute to kind of go, wait a minute, where did that go? It's like, oh, here it is. I have to click over and get it.
Find all the things that you knew, you're just in a different spot.
Anyway, enough speculation. Let's move on. Let's talk progress. The last we heard, you had a new video card, but you needed a power supply.
Man, it's been a week. So I needed that, and I told you about my case, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So the case had to go
with the duct tape and the Band-Aids.
Yeah, and
the smoke belching out of it,
and the power supply had to go, and those came in, and we had the video card, and we hook it up.
And you had the fan with the dead rat in it,
and
so it wouldn't spin.
Even though it was hooked up to a surge protector, apparently the old power supply melted my motherboard.
Nice.
Yeah. Wasn't that something? So that's a motherboard. Those are.
Wait a minute, you had to put in a new motherboard now?
Yeah, because it fried it. Apparently, the power supply had been gradually melting my motherboard.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, but you also said that your fan was not working.
2 of the 4 fans weren't working.
Oh, okay. So you had more.
So there was ventilation, and
okay.
it was pretty open. It was near my air conditioner and stuff. So decent ventilation, but yeah, one of the ports, one of the connections or whatever was just blackened. I was like, how does that even happen? It's still working. It was pulling some weird stuff in order to keep going.
Okay, let me see if I've got this.
Yeah.
A new motherboard, a new power supply.
Yes.
A new video card.
Yeah.
And a new case.
Yeah.
So you got a new computer.
Pretty much. So it's like you give a mouse a cookie.
Yeah.
It's like he's gonna want some milk.
So I mean, I'm guessing the processor and the RAM is about all that.
And my hard drives.
And your hard drives.
Yeah. And I think that's it.
Really?
I think we I was giving it over to my computer friends, and I'm like, this is going out of control, and they're like, we're gonna take care of it. I think they got me a new processor, and my RAM carried over. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But like, I oversaw half of it, and the other half I came in and to see them the next day. They're like, hey, we just went ahead and finished it up for you. Completely new computer now.
Yeah.
It's working.
Yeah.
I'm poor, and I don't have a lot of AAA titles on my computer because I never could run them, so I never bought any.
Right.
But I tried some of the most graphic-intensive stuff I could, just, like graphics testing to see if it works, and downloading all my stuff and making sure everything's working again. No time for Kerbal yet, but now I'm fully functional.
Yeah, now you sound like Data.
Yeah.
All of this, you got done with all of the installation and stuff like last night.
Yeah.
So we're talking.
Yeah, I was like logging in and downloading all of my games and stuff, and like this morning they were finishing up. So
like less than 12 hours ago.
Yeah, so I have this brand new computer, and
Okay.
It Facebooks pretty well. It's pretty
God,
good.
I hope so.
Pretty good at loading the Twitter.
Yeah.
And I only drive it on Sundays.
Uh-huh.
So
To church.
Yeah, to church on Sundays.
And it's downhill both ways.
Yeah. But yeah, it's snazzy, it's looking nice.
Good.
I went with a real basic case, none of the lights, none of the frazzles, super light. Old case was so heavy because it was like loaded up with so much like junk.
I have a suggestion.
What? Stay as far away from electronic devices as possible?
Well, okay, I have two suggestions.
Yeah.
That was the first.
And it's true because graphics card fried, which led to the, all that stuff with my computer.
Right.
Two of my friends' computers that I had used since then had also fried. The iPhone that you gave me to mess around with as a Wi-Fi device, just so I could still have something to use the internet with, Wi-Fi chip fried. I have a magnetic field or something that just like my mutant power is to take everyone around me back to the Stone Age.
Your new name, instead of Nostromo, you are now Magneto.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't even take that. My new name is Backtrack. Because, like, everything's just regressing. So, like, everyone around me and, like, my community is going to be back to, like, like, basic agriculture and, like, like making cloth on a loom and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, well, we can't really do much else because Shane will fry it.
Well, now, in your defense, you do know how to eat a coconut, so.
Yeah, I just said my real name. I just realized that.
You did?
You have to beep it out.
No, everybody knows
Everyone
who you
knows
are.
my name. Yeah.
Because you remember you sent out the...
oh, yeah, I told everyone on my Twitter.
Well, that, and also you sent out the interview video that you did at Gen Con.
Yeah, I did.
They clearly say your full name.
Yeah, it's right there. It's on the marquee and everything.
It's right there.
But, hey.
Magneto.
Magneto.
Yeah.
So.
Or as we call you, Maggie.
oh, Mags.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so...
multiple MIGs.
Everything is just gradually, going backward around me. But
here's my suggestion before we get too far away from it. Since you have not played Kerbal in a long time, and since you are going to be starting from scratch,
pretty much,
this
it's
next
feel
week,
like it. I'm going to feel so stupid once I get back into the VAB.
The next episode of Kerbalcast, episode 1. We'll just start renumbering them.
We'll do season 2, and I was like, now we're doing season 2, and we have a more experienced Kerbler and a somehow less experienced Kerbler.
Yeah.
That are the same guys from the previous one. How many hours do you have in the game? Oh, like 100, but I don't remember how to do anything.
Right.
How many hours do you have in the game? 1,000, but I keep forgetting how to do everything.
We'll be Star Trek the original series. We'll go to 79 episodes and then cancel ourselves.
Yeah, we'll do a reboot with the same character.
Right.
Like the same people, same actors.
And then we could do Kerbalcast the Next Generation.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Make it so.
Well, that's
make it so.
That's the chips and corn.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. And she is British.
They're Kerbalcast Next Generation.
You know, I confused Brits and Aussies.
Yeah.
Well, now Kerbalcast Next Generation had a British actor playing a French character, so we could have Amy being a Brit.
Yeah.
She could be French.
Or
Australian.
No, let's go farther than that. Let's have her...
And you already confused Freetoss and Andy.
Let's have her play a Minnesotan.
Here's an idea.
Yeah.
Kerbalcast the Next Generation.
Uh-huh.
Andy M. as Freetoss.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
And Akinesis Gaming as Amy.
Wait, no, because Chips and Corn, our next generation, they're going to be like Voyager.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, well, if you want to go in order, they'd be Deep Space Nine. They'd be Deep Space K.
If we go to the later seasons of Deep Space Nine, I'm fine with it.
Right.
Because in the early ones, they don't know what they were doing.
You know what's bad is whoever gets to be Enterprise will have to have a rock opening. You know, like we'll get some folk singer in here.
I feel sorry for whoever's Enterprise.
That's right.
Sorry.
Well, we'll cancel them after 4 seasons.
We'll provide you your first tub of goo.
Right.
So.
I don't know. I wouldn't. Can we come back and be Voyager for 6 of 9?
We're gonna get a reboot with a whole bunch of sexy new actors.
That's right.
Yeah, to really snazz it up.
That's right.
You're gonna get lens flare through your ears.
We're gonna skin tight cat suits and goo, and we'll smear goo on each other.
I think we're confusing our things here.
I think we are too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's your progress?
Okay, I have a lot of progress. You know that I've been burning my way through career. And as a matter of fact, the last time we did our show, you remember we only had like less than 5 days. I think it was 4 days between.
Yeah, we were a little truncated.
Yeah, very truncated.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a full week, and boy, did that make a difference in terms of progress.
What did you do with your week?
What did I do? I wrote this down before we started. Where I stand on career right now. My funds. 5,889,646. I currently have 206 science, which, given where I am on the tech tree, doesn't buy me anything.
Yeah.
And I have 64% reputation. This is what I've done this past week. Last week, if you'll recall, I had just finished my Duna mission, and I was in orbit. Since then, I have returned from Duna, and yes, I brought in a ton of science. Since then, I have done, I put an orbital station around Eve, which then turned into a surface outpost on Eve.
Ooh.
I returned a ship from Eve orbit. I have put a surface outpost on Ike. I have drilled on Ike 1,150 units of ore. That was the contract. And I have mapped 17 asteroids around Jool with the Sentinel Infrared Telescope.
I don't know that many asteroids happened.
And in Sandbox...
Oh, man.
I told you, I have a lot.
You need to get out more.
No, I don't.
No, you don't. Keep going.
Do you understand? You don't understand what a public service Kerbal is providing by keeping me off the streets, and not allowing me to interact with other people. I mean, I'm making the world a better place.
Oh, yeah.
You know, nobody has to put up with me. In Sandbox, you know that I have been messing around with the heat shields and aero braking. Well, the last week I told you that I had come up with an idea where I was stacking heat shields with the couplers in between them. Mm-hmm. It occurred to me that maybe the decouplers were not needed. So I stacked 3 heat shields and then tried to aero brake around Jool.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out I was absolutely wrong. If you cannot decouple a heat shield when it's burned away, it blows up the whole ship. It doesn't just... What I thought would happen was the heat shield itself would explode.
Eventually dissolve.
And it would expose the one under it, and then it would explode and expose the one under it. Well, no, what happens is when the first one blows, it takes out everything. So you do have to decouple
that really wants me to make an experiment of putting a heat shield that is like not connected to the main craft but out on a girder or something. Like have it separate from the rest of the craft to see if the entire craft explodes or just the part behind the heat shield.
Yeah, I could see that. My only concern, and I may be completely off base here, but my only concern is when I tried, because you remember we had a mic hit. The first thing that I tried to do when I was trying to come up with some way of aero braking, what I did was I created a bubble, which had the big heat shields on both ends, and then there were fairings between them. So I literally created a bubble.
Yeah.
Well, once you get past a certain length, what happens is when you start to aero brake, the ship turns sideways. And then what happens is you're exposing the fairings to all of that friction, and they don't have any heat tolerance at all, or at least the ones I've been using. And, I mean, that just kaboom. So My one concern with what you're talking about is that if we extend the heat shield too far, I'm just wondering if that would throw your center.
What I mean is like you have a rocket,
Right.
and then you just have a girder coming out of the side.
I like how you're doing visuals.
Yeah, I know. You have like a rocket and a girder coming out from the side of the rocket.
Oh, I see what you're talking about.
And then you have another pod.
Yeah.
So this
Right.
one has the correct heat shield.
Right.
And the small one just has an experimental heat shield. And if that one blows, see if it just blows up everything behind the heat shield,
Right.
or if the whole ship suffers from it.
So basically, you're not talking about.
I'm just talking about
just for people who can't see you. You're not talking about a beam sticking straight out. You're talking about beam sticking out to the side.
Yeah.
And then the heat shield's
Because
facing
what I
forward.
believe happens is everything behind the heat shield gets blown up.
Yeah. Think of it for those listening. Just think of it as a series of girders in an L shape with the heat shield facing the
Or like the letter H.
the letter H.
Yeah. You have a main column like a lowercase h. You got the main column and then the thing that just comes off to the side.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you could do that too.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. I go back to what I said earlier. I would love
This episode of Kerbalcast brought to you by the letter
H, as in horrible.
Horrible.
Horrific.
Hate this episode.
Horatio.
As in, how is your progress after everything you just said? So let's just continue.
Okay.
Just go.
I go back to what I said before. The movie 2010. I would love it if there was some kind of inflatable aerobraking shield.
Oh, yeah.
Airbags that you could deploy in the game. If folks who have seen the movie 2010 know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, there's a scene in the movie, for those who didn't hear the previous, I guess it was, 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, probably.
They do an aerobrake around Jupiter, which is the real-life equivalent of Jool. And they have these gigantic inflatable heat shields. And they aerobrake, and then when they're done, they release them. Mm-hmm. And I would love to see something like that in the game. I'm curious, and this thought occurred to me after we recorded the previous episode where we talked about this. I wonder if there's not a mod, maybe, that has that part. If somebody knows of that, I would be curious. I would like to know. But I would love to have, given that they've changed the physics, obviously, I would love to have more options in terms of aerobraking heat shields.
Yeah, okay.
Because right now, the heat shields are mainly designed for re-entry.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they had this thought in mind, for having those parts. I mean, I assume they had this in mind. But using them to aerobrake, that's something that I came up with. Which, like I said, I'm sure I'm sure at some point somebody said somebody's going to use these to aerobrake. They may not have thought about it the way I'm doing it, but I would love to see more options in terms of heat shielding for aerobraking.
Have you ever seen just modern stock car racing, like NASCAR stock car racing?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen whenever one of the cars gets spun around?
Right.
All these flaps open up to increase drag.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like all these flaps will open up whenever the car's going backwards to massively, decelerate it.
Right.
So they can get control faster and flip back around. It'd be kind of cool if you could build flaps like that you could just pop open to just increase your drag, and then you could just, either close them or pop them off.
Right.
Or if you had them installed just like it would be on the stock car things, that if you ever got turned around, it would increase drag on like one side to flip you back or something.
Okay, I'm going to use my nerd certification here.
Yeah.
You get points for dragging stock car racing into Kerbal Space Program.
Yes.
Okay, because that is a very clever real world association.
Uh-huh.
But you lose points. You lose nerd points.
Yeah.
Because you could have referred to Revenge of the Sith, where they flapped out those big drags on that ship they were on. You don't remember that, do you?
No.
See, you could have used that instead.
Yeah.
So you gain real world points, but you lose nerd points.
If they would have replaced the pod racing with stock car racing, it wouldn't have made a difference. But I don't know, maybe I would have watched it. I don't know.
Well, you also lose nerd points because you've got a healthy little glow there on that skin. You've been out in the sun. You lose nerd points.
I had to get here. I had to go outside to get here.
Where is your pasty white skin? Huh? Where's your pale skin?
I had to drive here. The sun happens on the way. We can't all have the studio.
The only
in
illumination,
our home.
the only illumination your skin should be seeing is coming from a computer screen.
Yeah. Well, I haven't had one.
It's this healthy sun glow.
Until the past like 12 hours.
You're already losing points for having a girlfriend.
Yeah.
So that's minus nerd points right there.
Man, I'm just losing them all.
Pretty soon you won't be able to call yourself a nerd at all.
Where do I go from here?
Well, up in the social popularity scheme.
I guess. What do you mean? Besides this, the only thing I'm known for is making a board game.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Well, that's true.
That's a great dating profile.
There you
right
go.
There.
I do board games. Anyway, so that's my progress. We have some letters. We have actually quite a bit of letters about this later in the program, but I do want to say, in the last episode, you remember I was talking about the confusion I was having about orbital speeds.
It's okay to feel confused.
It's okay. It's okay. I was talking about how I was wondering why my orbital speed around Duna was slower than it was around Kerbin, even though it was further out. Well, the question is answered later in the program, but in the last episode, I was saying that I was going to pull out some on my orbit and see where the speed was. And yes, my orbital speed around Duna is about half of what it is around Kerbin. And then to make things even more confusing, when I was going around Eve, my orbital speed was twice what it was around Kerbin. But again, the answer is coming. So distance from the sun, Kerbal, is not the determining factor in your orbital speed like I had thought might be. It turns out there's other factors at work. Putting the surface outpost on Ike was difficult because the contract required a ship that was capable of housing 8 Kerbals. And thanks to our listeners, I learned several episodes back that you don't actually have to have 8 Kerbals. It just has to be capable of housing 8 Kerbals. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you build something that is capable of housing the required number, and then you put a probe core, some kind of remote control on it, and then just land the thing and don't worry about ever bringing it back, which makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
But since it needed 8, and the only way I could house 8, well, I won't say the only way because I'm sure someone else has probably a more clever way of doing it than I do. The storage containers will hold 4 Kerbals. So I needed to figure out a way to get 2 storage containers onto my base, which means that I ended up with kind of this, imagine 4 symmetry. 2 of the symmetry were the storage containers, and 2 of them were fuel tanks with engines. Mm-hmm. Well, that made it a little, the balance on it was a little, it took several trial and error attempts to get it where the stupid thing would fly in a straight line.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the minute I lost my lower stages and it was just the ship itself, it immediately wanted to start turning, it was like it immediately wanted to make a left turn. Mm-hmm. No matter what I did, it wanted to turn left, which was a problem.
Yeah.
Because Ike was not to the left, especially considering that left kept changing. It was a
I was about to say, it sounds like left was a little different.
It was a continuous circle.
Yeah.
No matter how far left you go, it always wanted to go even more left.
If left, you go right,
So that was getting that there was difficult, but I did manage. Just all I had to do was 1 trip to Eve and 1 trip to Ike, and that's where the tons of funding came rolling in.
Yeah.
Once I unlocked the telescope, that unlocked the mission where I could chart asteroids. It's an easy mission to do. The only caution I would give to folks who have not done it, you need more fuel than you think you do. Mm-hmm. Because you're creating an orbit around Kerbal that is inside the orbit of Jool. Okay? you're in a solar orbit matching that a little bit lower than the orbit of Jool.
Yeah.
And it only takes about, if you'll time accelerate, it only takes you about a quarter of that orbit. I mean, you only go about a quarter of the way around Kerbal before you chart all 17 asteroids. But creating that orbit requires more fuel than you realize.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fairly simple contract to do. Just make sure you take more fuel, because my initial attempt was I took enough fuel. I took the same amount of fuel that I would normally use to get to Jool. Okay? Because, I'm all about building everything smaller now.
Yeah.
Well, I discovered about halfway of trying to get my apoapsis and periapsis correct, because it gives you an indication of how big that orbit is supposed to be. I mean, it actually gives you an outline of the orbit, and you have to match it. About halfway, I ran out of fuel. So I had this very lopsided orbit.
Yeah.
So the second time I went up, I took much more fuel. Anyway.
You just revert that one?
I'm trying to think.
Or did you refuel it?
No, I think what I did was, I think that one was a bust. I think I actually had to go back and try a second one.
Yeah.
So it actually cost me. I had a failed attempt. I had a failed first attempt, and I was so far I could not revert back.
Uh-huh.
Ordinarily, I would just revert back to vehicle assembly.
Mm-hmm.
No, I bombed the first one. The second one, I just made sure I had more fuel, and I was able to do it.
Yeah.
The other thing, aero braking around Eve is very simple. Eve is very easy to aero brake around. I was able to get a ship around Eve, and I want to say it was 4, but it may have been 5 passes of aero braking, and each one brought my apoapsis down. And eventually it got to where the apoapsis was where I needed it to be, and at the top of that I detached the lander, and then the main ship I burned and raised my periapsis, but I let the lander itself ride the lower periapsis down, and it came in down for a nice little landing, parachutes and the whole bit, and sat down on the surface, and boom, I had my contract. So I was really dumb. I should have loaded that thing up with science, and I didn't.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that is my progress. Let's move on now. J. Arthur has his progress.
Progress this week was good. I got my bugs worked out. Reloading the save file really fixed the problem, whatever it was. I have no idea what was causing it, and I have chosen not to reinstall FAR. That seems to cause a lot of problems, and with 1.1 coming out soon, it's going to need a new update to work anyways, I suspect. So I'm just going to go without it for now. That's not really necessary for what I'm doing anyways. There's only a few bodies with atmospheres on them out there other than Kerbin. But I redid my maneuver, got back to the Duna system. I'm orbiting Ike, and have sent the Demeter to Duna, as well as have sent the Devourer down to Ike to mine ore, which we scanned it. I actually went for a polar orbit this time, just to save time, so I wouldn't have to undock the Oracle. I could just use the scanner when it's attached to the Infinity. So that saved us some time. I might have screwed myself up another way, though. I haven't checked my Delta V chart, but because I'm in a polar orbit, I didn't get as efficient of a burn to get the Demeter to Duna. And I think I wasted too much fuel, and I'm going to have to mount a rescue mission. But we'll see how that goes the next time I get to play. I only got 3 or 4 hours to play again this week. My work schedule has changed dramatically. I'm a therapist for a school here in the area. I'm one of the therapists on staff for a college, and the semester just started, so it's pretty crazy. Just getting all the new students set up, the new student workers and the interns and all of that jazz. So I'm not getting a lot of time to play right now. But we'll see. I've got plans going in my head already if this is going to be a rescue mission, how to go get them. And that's progress for the week. Moving on to the thing that I think everyone wants to hear more than that is the 1.1 announcement that was on Squadcast this week. I took notes, listening to it. It was really short, only a half an hour, and Max Maps just pretty much went through and was like, "Here's all the stuff. Boom, boom, boom. Let me show you some pictures," and then that was it. There's going to be some more in-depth stuff that they're doing a little bit later, but I needed to record, so someone might write in about that, and I'll be checking whatever they post, and I might put some stuff on Twitter too in case you miss it as well. Anyways, the thing that they announced before that was that KSP is now coming to Xbox One. Was kind of expecting that. I thought it would be later, like they would test the waters on the console market with the PS4 first and then port it to the Xbox One. But if they feel confident enough in Unity 5, the new build of the game, and in the port that they can put out, I mean, really, the PS4 and the Xbox One are just gaming PCs that run specific operating systems anyways. So everything that I said way back when they announced the PS4 version coming out still applies. The Xbox One has got a slightly less powerful graphics card than the PS4, but since KSP is so much a processor-oriented game, I don't think that that's going to matter very much. And the Xbox One does have the more powerful processing core, as well as the huge support of the cloud, which we're actually starting to see some games that really harness the abilities of the cloud. I'm not sure if you guys saw the demo of Crackdown 3, where that they were showing all of the physics stuff that they were able to do with cloud-based computing, but if even half of that is accurate, the Xbox One is going to be able to bring a lot of computing power to the table that they could potentially harness, since a lot of the problems that we run into are physics-based hang-ups using too much of our RAM. And if you have technically an infinite supply of RAM at your disposal, then they can offload a ton of that to the cloud. All of this is really speculative. There's potential problems with it. So, again, we're just going to have to wait and see how it does. But, you know, the more people that can play KSP, the better. I'm all for that. So, best of luck to him on that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we'll see you here in just a bit. I do want to go ahead and say the audio letter that Jay Arthur sent in was actually longer.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about 1.1, and we cut some of it down simply because some of what he said was stuff that we had already said.
Yeah.
But when he recorded it, he didn't realize that at this point in the program we would have already said it. So, so that's Jay Arthur. In case you're wondering why your letter got shortened, it's because we had already said a lot of the things that you had said. So anyway, but good letter. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so sorry we beat you to the punch, but it's our show.
That's the advantage of positioning.
Yeah, we can make you say whatever we want.
Yeah, we may not be right, but we were first.
That's what matters.
That's right.
All the time I spent working in news, that's what matters.
That's right.
So,
yes.
For some additional progress, we have Freetoss.
Hey everyone, Freetoss here with my progress and an audio letter. I have a lot to talk about. In fact, I have so much that I've gone ahead and broken up what I have to say into sections, so Biff and Nos can play each one separately, and can discuss things themselves in between, if they want to. I'd like for this to be a conversation, more than just a giant monologue. I'll start with my KSP progress. This week, since Flight Fundamentals won't require much work from me in-game, I was finally able to start my proper 1.0 career. I added a bunch of mods, including things like Remote Tech, ScanSat, D-Magic's Orbital Science, and a few contract packs. I also disabled quick saves, loads, reverts, and crew respawns. I booted up my stream, and Caffeine Rage joined me for my first few missions. Things went relatively smoothly to start. I was doing the very basic early career missions of gathering science near the Space Center, launching my early rockets out of the atmosphere. Jeb was the first Kerbal in orbit. DK even joined as I sent Bob on a wild ride. After a few flips, Bob got sent on a suborbital hop off to the northeast of the Space Center. Not ideal, but I could work with it, and gather enough science to unlock a few more nodes. It was then that I got the shock of my KSP life. Guess who showed up in my Twitch stream? Das Valdez himself. That's right, DK had talked to him and got him to host my stream on his channel. The Uber player's Uber player himself. The guy who was the inspiration for me to even start Flight Fundamentals and get on Twitch in the first place. And here he was, watching me have Bob hop in and out of the capsule gathering EVA reports on his suborbital flight. He also brought enough people with him to give me by far my biggest audience ever, about 25 viewers. I was even the 5th most KSP Twitch stream at one point. Quite the feat, given that the Polar Expedition charity event was going on. So, needless to say, I was suddenly super nervous with DOS and all of these other people watching. Then, as Bob was coming in for re-entry, the game crashed. Lovely. So, I booted the game up again, and it crashed again at the same spot. I was the 5th most viewed KSP Twitch channel, and I couldn't finish my mission. Add to that the fact that I didn't have quick saves, meant that every time that I opened the game, Bob was back near Apoaps, and I had to try reflying entry every time. You can imagine how I was feeling when my KSP stream turned into a KSP debug stream. It took a few minutes, but eventually Caffeine Rage and DOS helped me get things sorted out. Something corrupted the save file, by the way. I'm still not sure what. I managed to finish the stream relatively strong. I killed Val on her first flight, and gathered enough science to head to the Mun, which will be the next mission that I wind up flying. Though something tells me Das probably won't watch me do that. Maybe I made a good impression. He was definitely his normal, friendly, helpful self. Great guy for sure. Also, I made sure to plug the heck out of Kerbalcast. We'll see if it leads to a spike in downloads. Looks like you guys owe me, huh? That's it for my progress this week, so I'm going to shut up for a second and let Biff and Nos take it for a bit.
I think we can safely say that I think we owe him more than just a spike in downloads. I mean, Freetoss, there have been, folks don't know this, but there are so many times when I'll have a question, and who do I bombard?
Yeah.
Him.
Yeah.
He's the one that I bombard. It's like, every time something comes up, I'm like, hey, I wonder, and then it's like, dear Freetoss.
He's acting like, we owe him for those downloads, but those are going to his episodes too.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
that's true.
That's just self-promotion, man. You gotta reap it.
Well, we're basking in the glow off the Uber player.
Yeah.
Which he is.
Yeah.
He is the Uber.
The Chips and Corn dynamic duo.
That's right. Chips and corn. Chips and corn.
Chips and corn.
Holy chips, Batman.
Yeah.
Whatever. I guess we've covered a lot of ground. Are we done with progress?
Yeah, I think we're done with progress.
Let's move on.
First stage expended. Second stage. The mission briefing.
And that means your letters and tweets, but in this instance, it also means articles, because for some reason this past week, a lot of articles were written about Kerbal Space Program. The first one comes from the Star Online, which you can find at thestar.com. This is a long article, so Nos and I are going to split it up. The name of the article is Kerbal Space Program Game of Science, and the writer is, am I saying this right? Geeson Cacho?
Yeah, or Geeson Cachow. No,
either way.
Yeah. Sorry, Geeson.
I wonder if he's a British guy from Australia.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, the article, it says, with the success of NASA New Horizon mission, the public got an up-close look at Pluto for the first time. Once considered the furthest heavenly body in our solar system, the dwarf planet captured our imagination as scientists showed off its ice mountains and wide plains. It's sure to spark interest in astronomy and ventures into space. The recent breakthrough reminded me of an indie title called Kerbal Space Program, released in an early form in 2013 and in a beta version this year. Unlike most video games that take place in space, this is an effort rooted in science. Players travel to different planets, but not at warp speed or while firing lasers at enemy vessels.
They always bring up the lasers.
Yeah,
everybody always brings up the lack of lasers.
Yeah.
So squad, just throw in a laser so that just
to
see what they'll talk about next.
Do you know what they need to point? A laser pointer.
Yeah, and that's it. So they're like, no, you do fire lasers. It just doesn't really
Think of how much easier Rendezvous would be if one ship had a laser pointer.
Yeah, right here.
Do it right here. Come on, right here.
It's shaking too much.
Look, I'm making the cat chase the laser point.
KSP puts players in charge at a NASA-like agency on the planet Kerbin, which is inhabited by little green beings called Kerbals. The mission is to explore the stars, but players have to start from the ground up. That means they must build more powerful rockets to get into space. They must perform science experiments to improve technology so the agency can build parts for more powerful rockets. All the while, different arms of the agency have to ensure its funding by completing contracts and various short missions. For a novice, that's a lot to take in, and unfortunately, KSP does not hold your hand. Apart from the few core tutorials it offers, players will have to study physics and rocket science on their own to figure out how to build a better rocket or construct a faster jet. They can check out YouTube videos that do a great job of explaining core principles, such as center of mass, aerodynamics, and the concept of lift.
Folks, I have to interject here, because Nos just pulled off something that was so funny.
Yeah.
One of the sentences was split between pages, and when he turned the page, there's the sentence is not only split between pages, but there's a gigantic picture on the page. So when he turned the page, he started on the next sentence after it.
Yeah.
And he completely covered it. It was so funny because I sat there. I mean, my eye went to the rest of the sentence.
I saw it as I was reading the next sentence. Like, oh, that's how that makes sense.
But you covered it so beautifully. I mean, nobody listening can tell that you did it.
Well, now they can.
Well, now they can because I'm praising you. But it was just so funny. I mean, I was covering my mouth trying not to laugh. But you just beautifully covered.
Oh, I thought you were covering it because you're going to throw up.
No. I mean, you beautifully blended like two sentences that weren't supposed to go together into themselves. So, well done, my friend. Back to the article. Most of the design work, however, is an endless loop of trial and error. After coming up with a design for a rocket, players test it out by performing science experiments. Sometimes the launch goes well, and astronauts come back alive. In other cases, the Kerbals crash land in a flaming wreck. That's when you hit the restart button and change things up. Once players get into space, they must deal with the concept of manipulating orbits to reach other heavenly bodies such as the Mun or Minmus, Kerbin's nearby satellites. To land on a planet, they also have to design a lander of their own.
At first, KSP can be daunting, since the player is attempting to be a rocket scientist, astronaut, and engineer simultaneously. But the game has a way of getting its hooks into you. A lot of times, I failed, and it was agonizing. But this is a game about making mistakes and learning from them. That, and the 15th time you modify a plane and it actually flies, there's a thrill and a feeling of ownership for that moment. The game gave me a deeper appreciation of what NASA did with its Pluto flyby. There's Herculean.
I know.
Herculean.
You're messing with me.
Amount of work involved in sending a craft 4.6 billion miles to explore the unknown. With Kerbal Space Program, I got a whiff of how intimidating it is to try and how rewarding it is to succeed.
Anyway, that article is the Star Online or star.com. We're going to do a link to it. But I thought that was a good article because it emphasizes the point that we make over and over, which is Kerbal Space Program is a game that teaches people and it makes them understand the difficulties and the mechanics of modern-day space exploration.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was a very well-done article.
Yeah, it was.
We have several articles, so we're going to move on to the next one. This article comes from GameSpot, and it says, Kerbal Space Program, a popular PC game in which players create and manage their own missions to leave the planet, has been announced for Xbox One. The announcement was made by way of a teaser video, which you can watch, but no further details were provided. The core appeal of Kerbal Space Program involves building rockets and launching them from a space pad. Although this may sound easy, it takes a great deal of trial and error. Once the game's green humanoids have been loaded onto your ship, blasted off into space, and successfully landed on a planet, they must be put to work on completing a mission. Again, this is easier said than done, thanks to variables such as fuel, electricity, and structural integrity issues, among others. In GameSpot's Kerbal Space Program review, we awarded it a 9 out of 10, praising it for its realistic physics, stiff but gratifying difficulty curve, and the many challenging ways to play that it provides. You will fail at this game. It will demoralize you, and it will stress you out. But, more often than not, it will soothe, quiet, and inspire you, our reviewer said. Innovative muscles will be stretched here that aren't stretched very often by games, and more complex moments require a sort of zen beyond being simply twitch-ready for a surprise attack. The review concluded, Kerbal Space Program has an almost sacred respect for the tiny miracles involved in space travel, and even at its most difficult, it deserves that respect in return. Again, that article from GameSpot.
Okay, now we have an article from Endgadget. The adorable Kerbal Space Program will land on Xbox One. Kerbal Space Program's cute little green engineers are coming to Xbox One. Much like the PlayStation 4 version that was announced in June, there isn't a release date listed for the spaceship building sim on Xbox. But considering the latter has an early access-like program of its own, we could theoretically see it on Microsoft's latest console before it hits the PS4. Maybe. The port's being handled by a mobile-focused developer, Flying Tiger, which original developer Squad says will allow them to keep a keen focus on the game's PC version. As Squad tells it, Flying Tiger has helped immensely in the process of upgrading the game to run on the Unity 5 engine and has deeply simplified Kerbal's upgrading process. Flying Tiger's resume isn't what you'd call impressive, but hey, neither was Rocksteady's prior to Batman Arkham Asylum. We all know how that turned out.
That is a backhanded compliment. Last article, and again, I'm going to post links to all of these, but last article, and this is more of a blurb than an article really, but it comes from Destructoid.com, and the title is Kerbal Space Program Targets Xbox One. I wouldn't want to play Kerbal Space Program on a console, but I'm deeply interested to see how the silly and also super serious space flight sim controls with a gamepad. It's headed to PlayStation 4 and, as announced this week, Xbox One. It's unclear if the full Kerbal experience will translate to consoles. It'll be tricky to support mods for one. But even if the ports end up being lesser versions, I'm glad to see this style of game represented outside of PC. The more people that play Kerbal Space Program, the better. That's the point that I was making.
Yeah.
I think the bigger the audience for this, the better it is.
Yeah.
For all of us.
It's more people being involved in a fun scientific activity.
That, and I mean, I'm also thinking of it in realistic terms. As fans of Kerbal Space Program, we need to be fans of Squad.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to keep Squad healthy so that they can keep making our game healthy.
Yeah.
So.
Totally.
Anything that puts money in their pockets. I know I say this repeatedly, but anything that puts money in their pockets is a good thing. And I do like that there is the emphasis on the PC version.
Yeah.
As long as they don't stray from that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I don't think they will.
I don't think they will. Anyway, those are our articles. Let's move on to letters.
If you've had enough of all those articles and you want to hear something nice and relaxing, it's time for the soothing sounds of Kerbal Carl.
Hey everyone, Kerbal Carl here. Biff asked for another audio letter, so how could I let down one of my favorite podcasters? After all, I only let down Kerbals, as I did on my last mission, which I'm going to share with you.
Hey, what does this red button do?
This is a story about a Kerbal. No, a hero, who just so happens to be a Kerbal. She's currently stranded in reverse orbit around Kerbin.
When I was orbiting Eve, gazing upon just the beautiful view, the only thing I could really think of was, is it really a 200-day transfer window I'm waiting for?
The story is also about a super awesome rocket that I'm mostly going to talk about. Remember my last audio letter when I said you have to watch what direction the moons are orbiting when you come up onto a planetary system? Yeah, I ignored my own advice. Right now, Kerbals are scrambling to build a rocket to go rescue her. After 3 unsuccessful tries of rescuing her, I'm taking a break and sending an audio letter.
Starting atomic engines now. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's really, really bright.
But the rocket, let's talk about that. I'm a huge fan of the atomic engine, which I used on my most recent creation. The atomic engine isn't going to blast you off Kerbin or land you on the Mun. What it will do, though, is provide a fantastic way to send you to a different planetary system. Let's talk fuel efficiency for a moment. For comparison's sake, most liquid-fueled engines have a 40-to-1 thrust-to-fuel ratio. What that means is, for every 40 measurements of thrust, you use 1 measurement of fuel. The bigger engines have an even lower ratio of thrust to fuel. You can see this for yourself if you right-click on an engine. As for the atomic engine, it's like every other engine out there. It has a 40-to-1 ratio. What makes it so special is that it uses only liquid fuel. You don't need to worry about bringing along any oxidizer. This means you can cut your fuel weight in half. So it's really like an 80-to-1 ratio.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Now, the downside. The atomic engine only puts out 90 units of thrust. So if you're going to be doing an interplanetary mission, 1 or 2 atomic engines isn't going to get the job done. At least not quickly. What I ended up doing was using 6 atomic engines with the Mk3 liquid fuel fuselage short. Each Mk3 shorty, has 2,500 units of liquid fuel. For those of you following along at home with your slide rule, that's 27 minutes of burn per, engine and fuel. Believe it or not, I've used this configuration to visit most of the planets in the solar system. I even got into an orbit around Eve and came all the way back to Kerbin. Unfortunately, that ship is currently in a reverse orbit around Kerbin. It would seem that someone forgot to put a heat shield and decoupler on the ship. We're doing investigations into preventing this and figuring out exactly what happened.
Am I a hero? No. Did I take risks? Yeah. But that's not what you think about. The thing to think about was, did that engine really just fall off the rocket?
So, give atomic engines a try. If you don't mind 14-minute retrograde burns, a little radiation sickness, and an occasional thermonuclear explosion, you'll love it.
Oh, this isn't good. Does anybody here know how to use a computer?
One more thing. I'm a Mac user, and I felt that I have to share something for my other fellow Mackies out there. I'm sorry, PC guys. I'll make it quick. Maybe this is obvious to every other Mac user but me, but there is a function keyboard on your keyboard that will let you use all the function F1 to F9 keys. Its location is next to the home key in the top right of your keyboard. The key is labeled FN in lowercase. Just press that at the same time as you press the F5 key and you're good. No more going to system preferences and enabling function keys. That's all I have for now. I did do a lot of docking, and maybe I'll share that next time. Take care, everyone. Homer to your mobile.
Okay, I have to say, we've gotten some great audio letters in the past.
Yeah.
That is one of the best.
Mm-hmm.
That was great.
Yeah, that was really fun.
There was a lot of work went into
guest
that.
starring a Kerbal. Yeah.
That's no moon. It's a space station. Don't let George Lucas get a hold of that, because pretty soon he'll go in and make a special edition out of your audio letter.
Yeah, like every episode we're going to have the same audio letter, just with more things added in.
Just more noises in the background. So, awesome letter. Thank you, Kerbal Carl. Very good. And good tips there. He had, you remember I made the comment a couple back that the atomic engines would be great for landers, except because of the length of the engines, it was difficult. Well, he had tweeted a suggestion as to how to make a lander using it.
Yeah.
But then he covered it in his audio letter, so we don't, later in the program when we read tweets, we don't have his tweet because he put it in his audio letter. Mm-hmm. But anyway, awesome job on the letter. We need to make Kerbal Carl a note to Amy, make Kerbal Carl a permanent character on A Kerbal Life. Because apparently he has the voice already.
Yeah.
Well, you want to move on to some of our letters now?
Yeah, you go ahead and start it off.
Okay, I've got the first one. This comes from Tross13. And he says, loving the show, just started listening a few weeks ago, and I'm alternating between going through your latest episodes as well as your very first ones. First things first, you guys put on a quality show, and I want to thank you for your hard work. As a one-time video game podcaster, I know how much effort goes into something like this, especially with the post-production. I come from the Little Big Planet community. Little Big Planet is a creative-based or creator-based game with mostly realistic physics and, yes, even rockets. The LBP community also tends to be very supportive and friendly, and I've noticed more than one prominent LBP player around KSP, Antichrist 77 in particular. KSP is my one true love these days, however, and my LBP days are more or less behind me. It's, what he says there actually kind of mirrors me a little bit.
Yeah.
Before I got into Minecraft, I was big into Little Big Planet. And I love, if you've never played Little Big Planet, this game is absolutely awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome whatever platform you play it on. As I've talked about, Nos and I met because we used to work together at a video game store.
Yeah.
When people came in, and this was back when it was the PS3, PS3 compared to Xbox 360 did not have the extensive game library. When people would come in and we own a PS3, I automatically said, the one game on the PS3 that you absolutely hands down have to have is Little Big Planet. And I was not kidding.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's a great, the thing is, and this is the way I always told people, and this wasn't me, trying to upsell them. I was being honest. I was saying Little Big Planet is literally an infinite game.
Yeah.
Because not only is there the base game, but people who play the game are also making levels, and there are thousands of them that get downloaded that get posted every week.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking literally years worth of content.
Yeah, backlog.
You'll never play all the content.
Yeah, and people are doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Like they made working calculators out of all the little switches in the game and stuff.
Well, also, some of the levels that I downloaded that were that were player made were better than the base game levels.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding. Some people made levels that were better than what you'll find in the base game.
Yeah.
But for people that came in, the PSP, which to me was a great idea, but Sony hobbled it by not having a second analog stick. The one game on the PSP that I would always recommend was Little Big Planet because it was a phenomenal game. The visuals worked very well on the small screen, and it didn't need a second analog stick because it was a side-scroller. So I always recommended, if someone had a PS3, I always said, you got to play this game, Little Big Planet. Mm-hmm. If they had a PSP, I always said, the game that you need to have is Little Big Planet. And you can also download fan content on that as well.
Yeah.
It is also a great game on the PS Vita and Little Big Planet 2, and now they're up to Little Big Planet 3. But those are great games as well. So if you like side-scrolling platformers, and you have a PlayStation something, be sure and get one of these games because they are a lot of fun. So he's right, because I went from like Little Big Planet to Minecraft to Kerbal, and Kerbal has been where I've been stuck. So I wonder if I ever get off Kerbal, I wonder what the next game is going to be.
Yeah, the next thing you're going to be hooked on.
Yeah.
You dragged me into a podcast of it.
My Pretty Pony. Back to the letter. Now on to part 2. I'm truly jealous of Biff for having grown up during the space race of the 60s. I'll just have to settle for movies and Discovery Channel documentaries. And then along comes KSP with all of its rocketry learning goodness. And suddenly I feel like I actually understand some of this stuff. In only a short couple of days, KSP quickly became the single most rewarding game I have ever played. Right now, I eat, sleep, breathe, and live KSP. My dreams are invaded by fuel tanks and patched conics, another fancy thing I learned, and I could not be happier. I'm a die-hard Kerbaler now, and here for the long haul. Tross 13. Excellent letter. Thank you so much. That is a very good letter.
Yeah.
I'm glad he mentioned Little Big Planet, because that is such a fun game. What's our next letter?
Orbital velocities, or the art of throwing yourself at the ground and missing. This one comes to us from Crater.
How could you miss the ground?
Twitter at Lithobreaker. Hey, fake chips and fake corn. Been a while since I wrote in, and I had a few minutes to spare while I sat watching a Windows installation progress bar. Yeah, I know how that goes. Mm-hmm. Though I bet that Freetoss will write in here pretty soon. My letter is about your confusion over the speed you're hitting various atmospheres at. You keep pointing out that orbital velocity is related to height, which is absolutely true, but you sort of have it backwards. The higher you are, the slower you go. To visualize that, think about a really eccentric orbiter on Kerbin, with your periapsis grazing the atmosphere at 70 kilometers and your apoapsis way out past Minmus at 70,000 kilometers. Way up at your apoapsis, your orbital velocity will be tiny, like in the single-digit meter per second range, but you're being pulled by Kerbin's atmosphere, gravity. As it drops towards Kerbin, it gets faster and faster until you get down to your periapsis. You'll be zipping along at somewhere around 3,000 or 4,000 meters per second. Then as you climb back up the orbit, gravity will be pulling you backwards. So you get slower and slower until eventually you get to the apoapsis and you're crawling along again.
You know what I just figured out?
What?
Do you know how I keep saying atmosphere, sorry, gravity?
Yeah.
He's dissing me. I just figured, because you remember, it was like last episode or episode before, I mentioned that in an earlier episode, I kept saying that, I can't remember what planet I was talking about, but I kept saying that it had no gravity when I meant it had no atmosphere. Mm-hmm. That's what he's doing. You turkey. I kept wondering why he was doing that, and then I suddenly went, oh.
Yeah.
You know, there is no love for the Biff.
So, re-entry velocities. If you start inside the sphere of influence of the body you're entering the atmosphere. Okay, I'll stop. Are dependent on
that wasn't in there.
Are dependent on how far out your apoapsis is. You'll re-enter faster from min-miss than you would from the Mun, and are both faster than a re-entry from lunar low Kerbal orbit. Sorry. That was me. When you're doing an interplanetary transfer, then there are effectively two components to the velocity that you hit the atmosphere at. There's the speed at which you entered the sphere of influence relative to the target body, plus all the speed that you picked up while falling down from the sphere of influence border. The first of these is a function of how eccentric your solar orbit is. Ideally, you'd have your encounter close to your apoapsis, or close to your periapsis, which means that the other one should be close to Kerbal orbit. Now, if your relative velocity to target was almost zero, then that would mean that your orbit around the Sun was almost circular, since it would match the target planet. And likewise, the further from Kerbal's orbit you are, the bigger the component is going to be. The second component is how fast you're going to end up going based on falling from the edge of the sphere of influence. This depends on two things: the gravity of the planet and the size of the sphere of influence. So, for what you're looking at, Jool is a long way further out than Kerbal, so your relative solar orbit velocity is high. So you hit this sphere of influence moving at quite a rate. Plus, Jool is scary heavy and has a scary high gravity, as well as a humongous sphere of influence. All this adds up to a hair-raising speed when you hit the atmosphere. Whereas for Duna, the orbit is pretty close to Kerbal, so your orbit is almost circular, and your sphere of entry speed is correspondingly lesser. Duna also has a laughable gravity, and a meager sphere of influence, which all adds up to a much less terrifying aerobrake. I hope that's cleared it up for you. Crater at Witherbreaker.
That is a great letter.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Duna, now that they've reconfigured the physics, Duna to me is a much more interesting planet to go to, simply because it has become a more accessible planet.
Yeah.
In the past, Duna was just kind of like, oh, well, you know, there wasn't really that much of a draw. Mm-hmm. I was more interested in the further out planets. But now this, you know, this is a callback, a way callback. Back in episode 2, you remember I did an interview with what was he, an orbital physicist or something?
Yeah.
Professor of orbital sciences.
Orbital mechanics.
Orbital mechanics, that was it. And I remember at the time, because I was still fairly new to Kerbal, and I remember asking him, and I don't know if this ended up in the portion of the interview that got aired, but I remembered asking him why, you know, the difference between an apoapsis and a periapsis. Why are you going so slow at apoapsis and so fast at periapsis? And the way he described it to me, which made perfect sense, was apoapsis is the top of the hill and periapsis is the bottom of the hill. Mm-hmm. And the reason that you don't think of it necessarily is because if you do mainly equatorial orbits, your orbit is, I mean, from your perspective, the orbit is on its side. So there is no top and bottom.
Yeah.
Which I understand space, top and bottom is such a relative term. But, you know, you have to think of it in terms of if you could turn it 90 degrees, then yes, you know, the apoapsis would be at the top and the periapsis would be at the bottom. But at the time, I could not figure out why do you have these? Mm-hmm. And it's because you're going from higher to lower. And obviously, as you go from higher to lower, you pick up speed. And as you go from lower to higher, you lose speed. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. One other thing I'm going to do, I told you that I experimented with the 3 heat shields trying to aerobrake around Jool and had no success. I'm beginning to wonder if it is not possible to get any lower than 195,000 meters above Jool.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to wonder if the atmospheric pressure is not a factor.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I have been trying to deal with is dealing with all that friction.
Yeah.
Well, what I may be discovering is that if you get too far into the atmosphere, the pressure is such that no matter how well shielded you are, it's going to crush your ship. And I think that may be, I still need to try to make a pass through Jool's atmosphere with multiple heat shields and decouplers. If I can go lower using that configuration, then my atmospheric pressure assumption may be wrong, or it may not be as accurate as I think. But I may be discovering soon that you cannot go lower than a certain altitude and aerobrake because the pressure is so bad. Well, let's move on. But anyway, good letter. Thank you very much. Next letter comes to us from Fell Knight. The title is Mission Control / Apollo 13. Biff Nos, Fake Biff, Fake Nos. Caffeine Rage's idea for incorporating a mission control into KSP intrigued me. And I have an idea for single player based off of what we saw in Apollo 13. For those who don't use the Dang It mod, it provides random failures of various rocket parts, increasing the longer you go without doing maintenance on your rocket. So it increases the longer you go. Okay. What I envision would be something like this, where it runs a random number generator on each of your major systems, engines, RCS, attitude control, battery, comms, etc., at the transition from vehicle assembly to launch pad. And each system would fail X hours, days, years into the mission without maintenance. And it could be various levels of severity, minor, serious, critical. When a part fails, that system no longer functions. Here's where mission control comes in. They spend time working out how to fix the problem and send the solution up to the spacecraft as in Apollo 13. A level 1 mission control would be able to solve a fault, but take a long time to solve a serious fault and be unable to solve a critical fault. Level 2 would be faster for minor and serious faults and would take time to fix a critical fault. This is what I envision happened on Apollo 13 in this scenario. Level 3 mission control would solve minor faults almost instantly, serious faults quickly, and critical faults in an average time. If a fault affected the engine system, for example, and you were on a transfer trajectory, you would be unable to make course corrections except with RCS, hope you brought some. If you missed a necessary point to make a maneuver, i.e. retroburn to get into lunar orbit, then you slingshot past the MUN. I think it would take a lot of work, but it could be fun. What say you? Fly fast, fly hard, fly far, Fell Knight. I give you a lot of credit. That is a very credible way. That's a very workable way of implementing a single-player mission control.
My favorite part of 13 is whenever they have to find what order to put things together to save the maximum amount of energy.
Right.
I don't know. I just love whenever they have to go through all that problem-solving stuff.
Because less than enough to run this coffee maker.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah. That is a good scene. Honestly, there are so many good scenes in Apollo 13, it's kind of hard to narrow it down.
Yeah.
That is a very workable way. I think Caffeine Rage was, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he saying that he wanted the interaction, like the verbal interaction?
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess in this case, the textual interaction.
Yeah, with that, to get the verbal interaction, you really have to go multiplayer, but the text interaction can be very just, them sending you notifications. Kind of like getting emails.
I think I said this last time, but the problem I have with that, there are so many variables at work.
Yeah.
It would be very difficult to implement.
We talked about it last time that there's so many variables that it would either seem incredibly generic or it'd be too much work to make it specific.
I can see how this works, though, because it takes out, rather than interacting, because when I was first reading this, I was thinking, because he was talking about sending the solution up, I was wondering if that would mean, for example, if something fails, the solution would be and I was thinking in Kerbal terms, but I was wondering if that meant like, the solution would be, okay, you have to EVA.
Mm-hmm.
And because you know how you can EVA and retrieve science, and you can EVA and repack parachutes and things like that.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it wouldn't be EVA and right click on some part and something.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he did it in terms of time and level, meaning that, a level 1 mission control would take a lot longer to fix problems than, a level 3.
Yeah.
And, that kind of takes out the whole concept of a textual or a verbal interaction. But this is very workable, because, you can easily calculate, a random variable for each part, whether or not it's going to fail. And then you can easily implement when a part fails based on the level of mission control, how long it takes to repair it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would like to hear, is this something that the listenership would like to see as part of the stock game? Is it something you'd like to see as a mod? If it's part of the stock game, is it something you would want to be able to turn off? I don't know. I mean...
Yeah, I definitely want the ability to turn it off, but as far as seeing it, I would totally try it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think where I kind of come from, again, I think this is a great idea. Where I come from, and this is the same thing I say about career, what I play Kerbal Space Program for is to build and to fly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I play. And managing contracts and managing funds and managing reputation and tech trees and things like that, that is all, to me, that's less important than build and fly.
Yeah.
And so this would add variety to the game, and I would probably do it maybe once. But just like with career, as soon as I get done with career, I'm going right back to sandbox, and I'm going right back to build and fly.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we've already established that I am probably not the typical KSP player.
Yeah.
I think the more typical player is somebody like Amy, who Amy plays almost exclusively career. I think what's atypical about Amy is Amy also goes out of her way to make it as complicated and difficult as possible.
I mean, those failure variables and stuff will make for interesting things. In career, it can get kind of stressful because you're also dealing with if something goes wrong and you don't fix it, that's lost funds on a potentially successful mission.
Right. Well, an example of this is Remote Tech, which, if you'll recall, I messed around with that mod for a while, and it's now been incorporated into the stock game. For those who don't know, Remote Tech requires you to have a communications network with your ships. If you're piloting a remote ship, in other words, if you don't have a Kerbal on board, and let's say you've got a probe around Duna, unless you have a communications network set up, you will not be able to control that vehicle remotely. Now, if you have a Kerbal on board, obviously they can. But even if you have a Kerbal in orbit around Kerbin, you still have to have a communications network so that they can communicate with mission control. Now, you can still control the craft. Obviously, this only matters when it comes to remote control. But if you do not have a communications network set up, you can find yourself with a ship and no control. And sometimes that can be a problem because the place that you're heading with no control is going to destroy the ship. I messed around with it. It was an interesting experiment, but after a while I got tired of messing around with the communication stuff, and I went right back to build and fly.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that, it's nice that Squad integrated it into the game, and it's nice that they gave it an off switch.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I like that anytime they introduce something new, they give you the ability to have it or not have it. So anyone who's been playing since the beginning, they're like, I just want to keep it the same, can get rid of it.
Well, I know that when they first introduced career, what was the one thing I praised them for?
Keeping science mode.
And sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you guys have introduced a whole new dynamic to the game, and I'm glad you did, but you also allow me to play the game I want to play, which I gave them high marks then, I give them high marks now. So anyway, good idea. I mean, it's a very workable, from a game design standpoint, it's a very workable idea. So good job.
All right, next one comes from John M. Hey, Biff and Noz. I'm sure you're getting hit with a variety
He actually spelled it that way, didn't he?
Yeah. I'm sure you're getting hit with a variety of answers to Biff's aerobraking concerns, but I think you're also underestimating the density of the atmosphere. You're going to experience more friction in a denser atmosphere, and thus more heat. For example, a skydiver can travel 100 miles per hour through the air, which is thin, but then when he or she tries to travel at 100 miles per hour through water, it doesn't go so well. Splash, splash, bubble, bubble.
Come on. Do it. I want to hear you really get into those. I mean, he wrote on the page, splat, splush, bubble, bubble.
Based on the Kerbal Wiki, the atmosphere on Jool at 190,000 meters is a bit thicker than Kerbin atmosphere at 30,000 meters. So if you imagine what it would happen if you dove into Kerbin atmosphere down to 30,000 meters, going 4,000 meters per second.
Duna, that last one was Tinkle Tinkle.
Yeah, well, I'm about to tinkle.
Tinkle Tinkle Little Star.
Duna, by comparison, doesn't reach the same density until you're under 10,000 meters. As far as your intercept speed is concerned, I would guess that this is a question of how circular your orbit is when getting to Duna compared to getting to Jool. The more circular, the lower your relative speed should be, or I think. Home or 2-year mobile.
I wonder if that joke translates, because that's a written joke.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally wrote home or 2-year mobile.
Yeah.
Homer 2-year. Okay. Yeah. You know, I told you that I've been experimenting with aerobraking around Jool. When I'm experimenting, and obviously I'm doing this in Sandbox, but when I'm experimenting and I'm not, I mean, the purpose isn't to, I'm not trying to do a mission. I'm trying to test something. So obviously I jettison a lot of how I would normally do things.
Mm-hmm.
This game would be so much easier if I played it the same way that I test things, which is when I created the little ship with the stacked 3 heat shields, do you know what I did? I went Alt F12 and infinite fuel.
Yeah.
So what I had going around Jool was I had a Mark III capsule, a little dinky fuel tank, and one of those heavy lift engines. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like the huge multi-lift engines.
Yeah.
And then I had the heat shields all stacked on the nose. And I had infinite fuel, so, I mean, that thing went literally off the ground, and I think my thrust to weight was like, 20 to 1 or something. It was just some ungodly speed.
Yeah.
And, I got that thing into orbit, and I, kept swinging it around Jool and blowing it up. But the whole time I was doing it, I was thinking, man, this game would be so much easier if I just played it with all the cheats enabled. So.
Well, there you go.
It wouldn't be half as fun, though.
Yeah.
Anyway. I also mentioned in the last one, when I was asking about thrust to weight, I was curious in terms of launch profile, how that factors. And what I'm still wrestling with is if I try and keep my thrust to weight ratio as close to 1-to-1 as I can, for some reason, I don't really seem to achieve much of an apoapsis, and I seem to burn a lot of fuel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, and I would love to hear from the listenership on this. When you're launching from Kerbin, do you set a speed that you then adjust? In other words, like, for example, 300 meters per second, and then once you're there, then you valve back your thrust to weight, or like 500 meters a second or something? Because I notice about 300 is where you start getting the aerodynamic effects.
Yeah.
Do you set a speed and then try and maintain that speed until you're into orbit?
From the previous, this was before the aerodynamics model. What it was is under 10,000 feet.
Uh-huh.
You didn't go above 200 meters per second.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Or sorry, 10,000 feet, 10,000 meters. Once you got over 10,000 meters, you went over that. I don't know how the aerodynamics model changed that, though.
Shoot, I should have just asked you.
Well, that's also, there's the new aerodynamics model, so I
Right.
could be completely wrong.
Folks, please weigh in. What because I'm discovering that once you get past about 300 meters per second during launch, it doesn't seem like you gain any more speed. I think the aerodynamics start pushing back on you harder past that point.
Yeah.
And it seems like all you do at that point is burn fuel and not gain any more speed. But, right off the pad, the inclination is to burn full throttle until you hit about 300 meters a second.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when, and again, I play with Kerbal Engineer. And so I during my launch, I spent a lot of time looking at that information window. But once I hit about 300 meters a second, that's when I look over to thrust to weight and I start valving back the throttle.
Yeah.
And trying to stay as close as 1-to-1 as I can, because it doesn't seem like I gain any more advantage past a certain speed. So please, folks, weigh in, because I'm still trying to fine-tune my launch profile, because I have a feeling that I'm probably wasting a lot of fuel getting into orbit that I don't need to. Next letter, and this is a long letter. I cut it down considerably, but it's a very good letter. It's from Supe, or as I call him, Supe!
Supe!
Hi, Biff, Nos, Amy, Freetoss, and anyone else currently around. I played through Career for a bit and made it to the Bun and Minmus and started popping probes off to a few other planets. I was getting my science and funds up enough to consider things like space stations and Duna exploration. As I said in my last letter, either some kind of knowledge osmosis occurred or my brain is just wired the right way for this, as I have been happily rendezvousing and docking and creating efficient orbital trajectories with little effort. Hey, tell everyone what you told me about your friend who was saying that rendezvous is difficult.
Oh, yeah, he just started listening to Kerbalcast, and he listened for a while, and then he eventually started playing. And he was telling another one of my friends, he's like, they're having a lot of trouble with this rendezvous thing, and it's not really that hard. And his response to him was like, well, I mean, you're an engineer. So, you've been to classes, and he and I have talked about it, and he knows a lot about, orbital mechanics and how all that works. Yeah. So I could see it being very easy for him. Yeah. It's funny, somebody's, it's like, well, it's because you're doing that thing.
Yeah. It's like you're already trained in that. Well, I mean, that's like somebody going, everyone says woodworking is really hard. Yeah, you're a carpenter.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the letter. However, something went horribly, horribly wrong, and I think I broke my Kerbal install. I chucked a small spacecraft on the launch pad, and everything started vibrating, i.e. the universe itself, till the ship shook itself to pieces and destroyed itself. However, it didn't destroy itself, as in blow up completely. It just shook itself to pieces, but nothing actually got damaged. That sounds like a bad install.
Yeah.
As he said. The ship even bounced upside down and stuck itself nose down into the ground with full engine fire continuing. And he even has a picture. This is funny. After repeat reverts, I discovered that even just a command pod on the launch pad would do this. I removed all mods after this, but it was still totally busted, and I had to wipe my game and start again. So I began Career afresh and decided this may be good, as I had more knowledge now and could be effective and efficient. Plus, I had a thirst for more mods. After carefully reading through Kerbal Stuff, Curse, the forums, and CCAN, I installed a delightful selection of around 145 mods. Oh, another reason to make fun of Biff, by the way. In the last episode, for some reason, I kept calling Curse Kerb.
Kerb?
Yeah.
I remember that.
I was listening to it later going, Kerb?
Kerb?
The hell is Kerb?
Oh, Kerb.
Curse. If you have a thirst for mods, you're going to be real tickled about 1.1, because apparently, as we said before, the however much RAM you have is your limit.
Yeah.
So I loaded the game and watched my PC run out of RAM and Kerbal die horribly. I used Linux 64-bit, but only had 4 gigabytes of RAM. So, 2 days later, after some slightly faster sticks totaling 8 gigabytes of RAM arrived, I loaded it up again, and this time it worked. I started Career and raced through, enjoying all the new features and parts. All station parts are being described as modular, so I can dismantle and move them around as needed to reconfigure or even attach engine modules to move obsolete sections to other planets' moons for use as orbital bases there, while the Kerbal station gets upgraded. Anyway, that's it for my Kerbal activities. He goes on and talks about the movie Moon, which he enjoyed, Gravity enjoyed, very good comments about Interstellar. He does mention that he is reading The Martian and is concerned that he is going to run into spoilers while listening to some of the older episodes. We carefully avoid spoilers.
Yeah.
About The Martian. Especially Nos, since he hasn't actually read the book.
I haven't read it.
So you're spoiler free.
I haven't read it.
He says, P.S. Love the book recommendations. Keep them up. I love authors like Alistair Reynolds. Very good. Charles Stross. Not read, but he's on my to-read list now. Stephen Baxter. Very good. Neil Asher. Peter Hamilton. Joe Haldeman. Asimov. Arthur C. Clarke. And so many more. I read a lot. Thanks so much. Soupe!
Soupe. Next one comes from Scott.
I feel like every time I say soupe, I feel like I should drink some ouzo.
Soupe ouzo. Biff, as I was driving home, your questions about the relation of speed and altitude around the different planets had me tearing out what little hair I have left. For a start, your question didn't have enough information for an actual answer. You discussed having different speeds around Kerbal, Duna, and Jool when your periapsis was at 200 kilometers, but it's impossible to make a comparison without knowing your apoapsis. Depending if your orbits were circular, elliptical, or a flyby trajectory, your speed at periapsis can be vastly different. To go towards answering your question, though, I'll assume you're talking about circular orbits at 200 kilometers around each body.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, why not? When discussing circular orbits, only two values have effect on the orbital speed: the body's gravitational perimeter and the orbital altitude. He has a bunch of equations here. I don't want to read them. In orbit around Kerbal, this works out to an orbital radius of 800 kilometers. Using Kerbal's mass of 5.29157 a lot, we get a circular orbit speed of 2101 meters per second. In orbit around Duna, we have an orbital radius of 520 kilometers with a mass of smaller. We get a circular orbit speed of only 761 meters per second. Duna is much lighter than Kerbal, so it takes less energy to maintain an orbit around it. Finally, Jool has an enormous orbital radius of 6,200 kilometers and a mass of more than the other two numbers, a good 80 times the mass of Kerbal. To maintain an orbit just at the edge of the atmosphere, we would need a velocity of 6,750 meters per second.
You're killing me here.
Over 3 times the speed needed to orbit Kerbal at a comparable altitude. This is all complicated, by the fact that you're discussing aerobraking, which tells me that you're probably coming in from a transfer orbit, which means your apoapsis is outside of Jool's sphere of influence. This means your speed at the periapsis of 200 kilometers will be blistering fast, much faster than the ballpark guess 4,000 meters per second you encounter when returning to Kerbal from Minmus. Because you're transferring from Kerbal to Jool, you're on a very eccentric orbit compared to Jool's. This means you'll enter Jool's sphere of influence with an already high velocity as you fall forward toward the planet. Things will only get faster and hotter. Sorry for the wall of text. I hope this was informative. Feel free to cut out useless numbers. And such if you decide to read this letter. Fly true, Scott.
You know what he should have said was, feel free to make a joke out of the numbers, which is what you did.
There were a lot of them. It's like 10 to the 24th power and all that. It's just numbers.
Well, since I wasn't reading, I was just following along with you.
Yeah.
I was scanning ahead, and I started seeing all these equations, and I was like, oh, my God. And I was just thinking, I'm so glad you got that. Because, I probably would have tried to suffer my way through them, but you just...
Scott, you're a really smart guy.
That was very funny.
This is a lot of numbers.
This right here is an example of why I love doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Because this letter, Scott, I tip my hat to you because it never occurred to me until you sent this in. It never occurred to me about coming in a transfer orbit.
Mm-hmm. He's
He's absolutely right. The whole reason that I'm trying to aerobrake is because without it, my apoapsis will literally take me into Jool's system and out again. And the whole thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to close that orbit without burning up all my fuel. So, yeah, he's right. I am coming in from outside the system.
Yeah.
And I'm whipping through. And it never occurred to me that because of that, I'm coming in a lot faster than I ordinarily would be. So, very good letter. And thank you, because that was something that never even occurred to me. So, these are some smart folks we got out there.
Yeah, on that Kerbalcast.
You know what? I bet they can read their clocks very well.
Oh.
Because I'm looking at my clock.
What does this say?
And I'm thinking to myself, what time is it?
It's time for the tweets.
Tweets.
Time for the tweets. Andy M., I bought KSP on October 14th, 2014, and my first Mun landing was on October 24th, 2014.
So 10 days later.
I think it set the tone for my future play. The Doug Below. Y'all were talking about paying for science last podcast. You kind of do that with the outsourcing R&D contract. That's true.
It's true, but it's not. I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But it's not quite what I'm saying. I would still love to be able to just buy it.
Yeah, like lump sum cash in hand.
Rather than transfer a certain amount of science or reputation into funding, I want to just buy the stupid thing.
Akinesis Gaming, KSP 1.1. Much excitement, and I watched it all naked, apart from socks, which were inside out. JD the Hutt, you guys won $1 million. Contextual contracts that appear based on your stuff in the game in 1.1. Franco 11-11. Song I play while I play, KSP. Bugs by Pearl Jam. I launch, stage booster, ship becomes unresponsive, then all stages go off. Bugs. Lithobreaker. POHM is what Aussies call us Brits. It stands for Prisoner of Her Majesty.
You remember, I wondered, because
Yeah.
you remember he was saying Aussies are palms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going, what is a palm?
Yeah. Karmesk, your orbital speed only depends on the celestial body mass and the radius of the circumference. Metalman 333, most of the speed difference between Kerbal, Duna, and Jool comes from the different gravitational forces of those planets. Turcot 282, Biff, mass, and gravity are all linked. Kerbal has more mass than Duna, and Jool has more than both. That affects your speed. Ghost Shark 20, Biff, you're killing me. The second A in ablative sounds like the A in cake.
Yeah, I was saying ablative. It's ablative. So, and apparently it doesn't matter what kind of cake.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll say ablative. Can I? Okay. You know what? I can't do this anymore.
No. Are you spent? You done?
No, I can't live this lie anymore. I've got to be honest.
Okay.
I know how to pronounce ablative. I know how to say Patreon. All of those mispronunciations, I'm sorry, I have to admit this, they were on purpose.
That is, it takes a lot of Herculean effort to say that.
Well, I discovered a long time ago that if I mispronounce things, I get letters.
Yeah, and that's what we feed off of it.
Yeah. So ever since then, I've been putting up this facade.
Yeah.
Just to get the letters.
It's an interesting thought, and you thought it through. But in the end...
Okay, I'm going to have to stop because now I'm choking to death. Anyway, thank you so much. What time isn't it?
It's not time for the tweets.
Tweets.
Not time for the tweets.
Final stage expended.
And we're just pining for that mining for J. Arthur's mining tutorial.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 10th J. Arthur mining tutorial. Honestly, I can't believe I made it through 10 of these so far. I hope I get 10 more in before Biff and Nos figure out my master plan. Oh, whoops, said too much already. Quick to the tutorial. Last time, I said we'd start this tutorial by discussing fuel versus ore loads on your craft. In order to do that, we need to discuss the efficiency of ore in comparison to the efficiency of fuel. When full of ore, the large ore holding tank weighs in at 17 tons, with 15 of those tons being ore, while 2 is the tank itself. It's 1.9 meters tall and 2.5 meters in diameter. By comparison to fuel tanks, it has the exact same dimensions as the Rokomax X200 fuel tank, or is roughly 1/4 the size of the orange Rokomax tank. You might think that because it's the same size as the X200, it would be able to fill up one X200, but you'd be wrong. Ore converts 1-to-1 mass-wise with rocket fuel, meaning that each ton of ore will give you 1 ton of liquid fuel and oxidizer in the appropriate matching amounts. This means that one large ore holding tank can fill up 2 X200 fuel tanks, or almost half of an orange fuel tank. That means that on a standard rocket-fueled craft, you can effectively double the amount of fuel you carry because ore occupies half the volume that standard rocket fuel does. This effect is even greater with just liquid fuel. While ore still converts 1-to-1 mass-wise again, because you turn all of the ore mass into liquid fuel, it converts it 2-to-1 unit-wise. That means that 1,500 units of ore becomes 3,000 units of liquid fuel. That means that liquid fuel-only rockets will have quadruple the amount of fuel capacity because ore only occupies 1/4 the equivalent volume as liquid fuel does. Liquid fuel-only tanks, however, do not match up as well size-wise as rocket fuel tanks. It takes 8 Mark I fuel tanks to just get over 3,000 units of liquid fuel, or one small Mark III liquid fuel fuselage can get 2,500, which is the closest a single fuel tank comes to matching this output. Designing a liquid fuel-only craft, then, is a bit more complicated, but there are ways to do so. You could always just take rocket fuel tanks and empty the oxidizer. You get a bit more weight from the individual fuel tanks that way, but it makes your design simpler. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is to use the quad adapter or quad coupler, depending on your particular craft design. This allows you to easily stick Mark I fuel tanks in without needing complex fuel storage setups. It also keeps the fuel in line with the rest of the vehicle body, which is helpful for balancing your center of mass. Just attach an adapter at each end and add some struts for rigidity. Please remember that the aforementioned efficiency numbers only take into account the actual fuel itself, and not the fuel efficiency of your craft overall. That number includes the weight of fuel tanks and parts that you need to make your fuel system actually function. While the effects are minuscule, it is often enough to lessen the average efficiency of ore down to around 90 or 95%, as using ore requires an ISRU and potentially extra fuel lines, struts, and definitely extra power producing parts. Granted, it's still more efficient to use ore than actual fuel, but you won't get true double or quadruple efficiency rates from your ore. Taking all of that into account, the question then becomes how to use this information. Well, it depends on your design philosophy. Let's go back to the various craft types I've discussed before. For a single craft design, you want the majority of your fuel to be in ore. It will cut the size of your craft down considerably since ore tanks are half the size of their equivalent rocket fuel tanks, and in all likelihood this type of design will be using rocket fuel engines. Apollo-style craft also need to follow the more ore is better philosophy for the exact same reason. It will greatly reduce the overall size of your craft, allowing you more freedom for other useful parts. Mothership designs are the exception to the rule. This craft design benefits from having extra fuel storage, as dock ships can more quickly and easily fill up by taking from the larger fuel supply. Depending on your mission parameters and ships that are docking at the mothership, the amount of fuel you need will vary. However, as a rule of thumb, I'd recommend matching the total amount of fuel your dock craft use in a reserve tank. It's a lot of weight to carry around, but in this design type you benefit from the added security having extra fuel gives you. You still need a large amount of ore to keep all this going, but ore isn't as much of a priority in the ship design. Speaking of the mothership design, it will receive the final instruction in this very long series. What craft do you bring with you? Well, to answer that, you need to remember one very important fact. If you've made a mothership, you don't care about the size of your craft. Likely you're lugging around a few hundred tons of metal and fuel in a ship that's a few dozen meters long. It may very well be much, much more than that. The point is, you don't need to worry about efficiency much here. Think of these like real-world semi-trucks. They may only get 5 miles to the gallon, but you've got 1,000 gallons of fuel in the tank. With that in mind, bring lots of craft with you. I chose to bring 5 with me on the Infinity. If I was also going after science, I probably would have brought 8. You may be saying to yourself that that's a lot of ships, but it's good to have all of them. While in some respects it's more efficient to have a jack-of-all-trades ship, since, as the saying goes, jack-of-all-trades, master of none, sometimes is better than master of one. This rings true in a non-self-sustaining ship, where every gram matters to your overall efficiency. In a self-sustaining ship, however, your efficiency is less important. This goes doubly true for a mothership design. Having specialized ships means that you can more thoroughly recover science when you land, meaning that you need to make less trips. It means you can mine more efficiently, as none of the ship space is wasted on science or scanning gear. It means that you can scan more fully for ore and come up with better deposits. It means you can bring backup propulsion and rescue ships for when something inevitably has a Kerbal moment and blows up. Bringing so many ships with you also means that you can bring backup ships for various purposes, and if you wanted, you could use them all at once. All of that really boils down to the fact that you now are presented with choices about how and when to deploy the tools you have at your disposal. Choice means that you can pick the right tool for the job, rather than being stuck with a hammer for every screw. What ship you should bring again falls into the category of depends on your mission parameters. However, there are a few necessities. Obviously, you need a ship which can scan for ore and then mine said ore. This can be done as 1 or 2 ships, but my recommendation for a mothership is 2. You need a ship that serves as a tug. It can rescue ships stranded in orbit and can help you rearrange your mothership pieces on the fly. While you won't need to do this often, it can be invaluable if something happens to your craft in flight. Having a crew transport ship is also a fairly high priority. Again, these are very helpful for rescue missions and provide you with another way to land on a body. I use the Demeter for this purpose on the Infinity so that I can plant multiple flags at once. Finally, it never hurts to bring spare parts. A backup drive section, mining rig, or power generating module can save your Kerbal lives in a pinch. I'd also consider backup ships themselves as spare parts, but since they're full-blown ships, you could use them simultaneously with the others, so they're kind of like side parts. Other ships at this point fall completely into your mission parameter and personal preference. If you're going after asteroids, a grabber ship is obviously a must. If you want science, then additional science landers and rovers would be useful, and so the list goes on and on. Well, that wraps up this massive 3-part series on self-sustaining ships. I think I've covered everything, but if you have any questions you want answered, I'd be happy to address anything that I may have missed. Just send questions to @JMA4707 on Twitter. Also, I think it'd be fun to do an entire tutorial that was based on Q&A. Now that we finished this up, I want to do a really fun tutorial on a topic that comes up all the time on this show. That topic would be mods. Next time, we're going to be talking about mods that mostly directly relate to mining stuff in the game. I've got a big list that I use myself, and I may throw in a few others that I enjoy that don't really have anything to do with mining at all. Until next time, Jay Arthur, signing off.
A master plan, he says.
We're going to have to make note of that in the archives.
Yeah.
And take it before the council.
Yeah, actually, our master plan is we just get enough people to send in audio, and we won't have to do anything.
Yeah, just make it through the podcast is our master plan.
Which sometimes is a real Herculean effort.
Yeah.
Let's move on. It is time to bring back our friend Freetoss, Chips, for this week's Flight Fundamentals.
Greetings, Kerbonauts. Freetoss here with episode 19 of Freetoss Flight Fundamentals. Last week, I gave a review of the Kerbal Aircraft Expansion mod. This week, I'll be returning to the basics of Flight Fundamentals and talking about aerodynamics and different design features of planes. When I first started Flight Fundamentals almost 20 weeks ago, the target audience I was trying to reach were those listeners out there, and Biff, who hated planes and didn't know how to build or fly them. I made the decision to give practical advice to get people off the runway and into the air quickly and easily. My teaser for this week's Flight Fundamentals was about explaining how wings work. Lift is a tricky force to explain 100% accurately from a purely physics standpoint, and this is a podcast about Kerbal Space Program. You put pre-made wings on planes, we're not designing airfoils. So with that in mind, this week will not be a pure physics lesson. Instead, it will be focused more on how wings and other lifting surfaces affect your plane's performance in given situations. You know, stuff that actually can help you play the game. I want to explain some vocabulary first when it comes to wings. A wing's span, or length, is simply how far the wing extends from the fuselage of the aircraft at the wing's root to the wing's tip. The wing's chord is its breadth between the leading and trailing edges of the airfoil. The aspect ratio is a measure of the ratio between a wing's span and chord. A high aspect ratio wing has a very wide span, but a very short chord. Let's talk about wing shape. There are three main characteristics I want to cover: aspect ratio, sweep, and geometric shape. High aspect ratio wings with very long spans and short chords are the most efficient and stable wings. They generate more lift than a low aspect ratio set of wings for the same area, and also generate less lift-induced drag, which dominates at subsonic speeds. Low aspect ratio wings, which are short and stubby, gives a plane more roll maneuverability, and in real life are more structurally sound. Next is sweep. Rectangular wings that jut straight out from the fuselage perform best at low subsonic speeds. Highly swept, sleek-looking wings perform better at supersonic speeds. There is some complex aerodynamics going on here that has to do with shock waves and the drag they induce. Think of the difference between the wings on a small Cessna, a 747, and the Concorde. The faster these planes are designed to fly, the more their wings are swept. Lastly, wings in KSP can also be made as triangular delta wings. Delta wings are generally very low aspect ratio, so they perform poorly at low speeds and during takeoff and landing. Delta wings can also bleed off a lot of energy via drag when turning, which can be a positive or negative depending on the situation. Delta wings, in general, also have very good stall angles, enabling steep climbs and good maneuverability. You've chosen the shape of the wing for your craft. Now, how do you attach it to the fuselage? Where you attach your wing can have a surprisingly dramatic effect on your performance. The most important thing to keep in mind with wing placement is your center of lift. A center of lift behind your center of mass produces an aerodynamically stable craft. The farther back you put it, the more stable it will be, but the harder it will be to control. The closer your center of lift and center of mass are, the more maneuverable your plane will be. Attachment of the wings higher or lower than the center of mass can also affect your plane. Attachment high on the fuselage so that the mass hangs below the wings increases stability at the cost of maneuverability. The opposite is also true. Attaching your wings low on the fuselage increases your maneuverability at the cost of inherent stability. Imagine balancing your center of mass from below versus hanging it from above. Your wing's dihedral angle also affects stability. If the wings are angled upward so that the wing tips are higher than the roots, your wings have a dihedral angle, increasing roll stability. If your wings are angled downward so that the roots are higher than the tips, then your wings have an anhedral angle, which increases your roll maneuverability. Dihedral stability occurs because as your plane rolls, say, to the right wing lowers towards horizontal. As the wing becomes closer to horizontal, the lift it generates increases. Conversely, the left wing will generate less lift. Combined, increased lift on the right side and decreased on the left will tend to return you to level flight. You can test this effect yourself using the in-game aerodynamic force vectors. That just about covers main wing design. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, you can feel free to send me a message on Steam or tweet to me at Freetoss7. Look for me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Freetoss7. I hope to see you in a stream soon, but if not, I'll talk to you again next week about control surfaces, flaps, and spoilers. Home to your mobile.
You know what I wonder about Freetoss, though?
Uh-huh.
With 1.1 coming out, do you know how when we went from .90 to 1.0, do you know how a lot of his flight fundamentals all of a sudden had to be like, like forget everything I just said?
Aerodynamically thrown out the window.
Yeah. I wonder if every time Squad upgrades the game, Freetoss has to like start over.
Yeah. Like, okay, back to, this is air. And this is how you move through it.
Our friend the wing.
I gotta say something about his next one, though.
What?
No spoilers.
No spoilers?
We just talked about how we don't spoil anything, and he's gonna do a whole one full of spoilers.
Yeah, but those are airplane spoilers.
Oh.
It's different.
Okay, well, as long as I don't see the end of them.
You should tell people the way that Nos listens to Flight Fundamentals. He listens to the very first part, then he skips to the end and listens to the last line.
Yeah.
And if he can figure out what happened in the middle,
then I get it.
Then he gets it. Then he doesn't listen to the rest.
I've airplaned so much, it is and spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering how badly we're devolving here, let's move on to something actually fun.
Yeah, let's move on to a Kerbal life.
And now for an update on Monstrosity 1 as it prepares for lunar descent. The ship carrying, hold on there, folks. It looks like I've spilled coffee on my notes here. Let's see here. Nope. Well, okay. To summarize around the coffee spill, Monstrosity 1 is preparing for lunar descent. In other news, researchers now believe that the desert temple may not be a temple at all. This comes.
Monstrosity 1 to mission control. Lunar orbit circularized. Burning retrograde for a steady descent.
Copy that, Bob.
Bob? Scratch that, MC. Burning hard for immediate descent and going for a suicide burn. Sunrise.
Is there a problem, Bob?
Just taking in all the factors, MC. Jeb, hold on to something down there. We're going in for a quick descent.
I'm not too surprised. Copy that.
You too, Dwayne. You'll need to strap into something. This is gonna get rough.
Okay, Bob. There, strapped in. Like my daddy always says, when you're scrappy, you're happy. When you're not, you get the donuts.
Right. 3 kilometers in closing. Suicide burning. 200 meters per second. 100. And we're down. Jeb, are you alright? Biscuit Jool.
I'm fine. See you outside on the sea of... Jeb face.
Dwayne, you can unstrap now, but it's up to you if... Dwayne? Jeb, Dwayne's gone. Have you seen him?
He's running in circles outside. Seems pretty happy. I'm just glad he doesn't know how to use the suit's radio.
Whee!
Scratch that.
On my way out.
Dwayne, could you come over here?
Jeb, this is so amazing!
Yep. Listen, Bob and I are going to find Val. Why don't you stay here and guard the...
Nope, I have to go wherever you go. My daddy said, always remember stranger danger.
Stranger danger? Dwayne, we're on the mud.
But my daddy's always says...
Okay. You can come with us.
Your face is here, Jeb. Should we head to the cave? Run away, ice cubes.
Jeb, that doesn't look much like you. Did you get old?
What? No, Dwayne, I wasn't thinking and was overexcited and was a bit like you. Ugh. Anyway, I had my helmet on and that's the imprint. Bob, let's head out.
Jeb?
Yes, Dwayne? Was it warmer last time you were here? No, it was about the same.
Bob?
Yes, Dwayne.
Are we there yet?
Okay, I'm gonna walk you through this. Do you see that cave over there?
Yes, I see it.
Are we standing in or next to the cave?
No?
There you go.
Bob?
Yes?
So, are we there yet?
Dwayne, we have an urgent mission for you.
Really? I'll do it. Whatever it is, I'll do it.
You have to run to the cave and make sure the floor isn't slippery for when we get there.
I can do that. I won't let you down.
Thanks, Jeb. I owe you one. You know, we could leave him here.
We could.
The floor's not got any slippery parts, Jeb. I checked 1, 2, and 3 times. My daddy always says, check it once, check it twice, check it 3 times to be nice.
Your daddy says a lot of stuff, doesn't he?
He's really smart.
Val? Val?
Where is she?
We've only met once, but she did show a tendency to jump out and scare the sneezes out of you.
This is her camp, but there's dust on this stuff. She's not been here in a while.
I'm gonna have a look around.
But her ship is wrecked, and it's not like she has many options. Did she leave a note?
Bob? What's this big metal...
Not now, Dwayne. Well, she knew we were coming back. Can you see a note or anything? Comet mustache.
Nothing, but there's no way off without a ship. Could someone have come to get her from the colony?
Jeb, the thing moved. Now there's a shiny...
Not now, Dwayne. But there'd be signs. She'd have let us know so we could find her.
I'll just try walking through this blue shiny thing, then just see if it's like water.
Keep looking. Maybe there's a... Wait, what? Dwayne?
What was that?
He's gone.
Where?
Mission control to Jeb. Are you guys alright?
Why do you ask him, see?
Well, we picked up a bit of heavy static from you just now, and I can't help but being a daddy.
A daddy, MC?
You didn't know I'm Dwayne's daddy? How is that little sprout? He's not causing too much trouble.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
The Kerbal Life was written by Amy Kettlewell with music by Lee Rosevere. Jebediah Kerman and Kerbal Space Program were created by Squad. The game is available for purchase on Steam or kerbalspaceprogram.com.
Okay, can I say it?
Go for it.
Dwayne is MC's son.
Yeah.
Not quite the Darth Vader, I am your father.
Well, remember how that started out.
Yeah, that's true.
It may get better. Who knows?
Yeah. Now, Luke, I'm your father.
No! It's impossible!
Oh, my God. Okay, well, let's move on. We would like to thank all of our listeners and regular contributors. Folks, as much effort as we put into this show, you put in a lot more, and we would not have a podcast were it not for your efforts. So thank you very much to everyone who sent us letters or tweets.
And the subreddit moderators at Kerbal Space Program and Kerbal Academy. Also, episode music comes to us from Professor Soap. You can look for him on Facebook or at profsoap.com.
And a big thank you to Ascalon, who posts episodes of Kerbalcast to YouTube each week. As always, remember, you can get in touch with us at kerbalpodcast@gmail.com, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Kerbalcast.
You can subscribe to us on iTunes and download any episodes of Kerbalcast at kerbalpodcast.libsyn.com.
No, you can't. You can also find us on Steam as Biff Aldrin and Nostromo.
Hey, I'm back on there now, because I actually have a computer.
That's true.
Yeah.
A new computer.
So fast.
You get the feeling that your RAM chips are looking around going, hey, this place is different.
Yeah, like everything else changed.
This is different. What happened? Mom and Dad must have had a fight. Where was...
If you'd like to support Kerbalcast, and believe me, we need some kind of support, you can donate at patreon.com/Kerbalcast.
Wow, that was so bad. We mentioned the Twitter. We are very close to 1,000 followers.
We're almost there.
Woohoo!
So bring in some chumps.
This past week has been just insane on Twitter.
One of those chumps could be number 1,000.
They could be number 1,000.
Yeah.
We had there were so many conversations that were going on Twitter this week, and I would, you know how you just periodically pick up your phone and just check and see what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'd pick it up, and the Twitter app would be like, 20 plus tweets. I'd be like, what?
What?
And then I'd get there, and they'd be having these conversations like,
yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I wasn't here for this.
You see, it's more fun when we don't hang around.
Yeah.
Anyway, that wraps it up for Kerbalcast episode 63, 1.1, and Xbox One. All the details that we know about both of those at this point. I am your LMP, Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, our CMP, Command Module Pilot
Nostromo.
Until next time,
Happy Kerbaling.